welcome back to the PhatPhish Guitar Studio. I'm Dave and this is another video in the series Tone Talk. A little series of videos talking about how to get the most out of your gear, whether it's effects, amplifiers, guitar, whatever, to get a tone that works for you. And it's all about building up your own sound. Now, when I first started planning this series of videos, it was going to be called Sins Against Tone, and it was like inspired by all the things I've seen over the years. People just not setting the sound up right and coming up with something that sounds horrible. And then the idea kind of morphed and it became the Tone Talk series of videos that it is now. But what I'm going to cover in this video is the thing that sort of inspired it, and it's about the way that you use overdrive and distortion type of effects, because they're very, very effective, they're really good to use, but it's very easy to abuse these sort of effects. So something I've come across like so many times is students that have started off with a guitar and a fairly cheap amp. You know, if you think about it, you know, the Squire starter set that's got a little 5 or 10 watt combo with it. Not a brilliant amp. I mean, it's a really good starting point. It's certainly better than anything I had back in the day when I was first learning guitar. But the only sort of option that they've got is a clean tone. And if you want to play heavy overdriven guitar, you think, well, I want distortion. So they get a distortion pedal, and the first thing that they do is they just turn it up to 10, and they get something that sounds like this. Because it's distortion, it sounds better. And what would sound better than distortion? More distortion. Well, that's kind of a bit of a myth. The idea that heavy guitar is distorted, so to make something more heavy you add more distortion, is actually a bit of a fallacy. Because if you add distortion, you start to lose a little bit of definition. So what I'm going to do in this video is kind of demonstrate that and explain why that's the case, and give you a few tips for how you can set your gear up to kind of get the most out of it. Okay, so basically there I have the drive on the amp set all the way up. I'm going to back it off to something a little bit more sensible. Okay, so the gain's quite a way down now, just a little bit of breakup, but it's not what I'd call a heavy overdriven or distorted sound. Just for reference, the guitar I'm using today is this Thompson custom build, and all the sounds are going to be coming from the bridge pickup here, which is a DiMarzio Tone Zone. It's a great sounding pickup. So what I'm going to talk about here is how you can use gain. So what happens with gain, I think I've talked about this before, is basically if you think about this as being your, like the sound coming out of your guitar, is you increase the gain, it gets louder, yeah, and then you take it beyond a certain point where the electronics and the preamp or whatever circuitry can't cope with that, and it starts to clip and it starts to compress and it starts to distort. That's what's happening when you hear overdrive. It's just basically the signal being given so much gain, so much level, that it starts to break up. So the way that I've got the guitar set up here, going into the amp, the gain's not especially high, so I'm getting some clipping, I'm getting some compression and distortion, but I'm not getting tons and tons and tons of dirt. So what you probably notice in that first example, this just gets all a bit mushy. Everything's kind of squashed in on itself, and you lose an awful lot of definition. That's the price that you pay for having so much gain. But there is a way you can add a lot of gain to your sound, but still keep it heavy. So there's the basic sound, and what I'm going to do, and this is going to sound a bit counterintuitive, is I'm going to actually add some more drive and distortion, but in a way that doesn't make it too overdriven. So I've got a few pedals down on the board here. I'll be doing a little bit of switching between them. What I've got here is the Boss Angry Driver. It's got a few different modes. So this is just the clean channel on the amp with the Angry Driver in the Blues Driver mode. So this is a fairly light overdrive sound. Yeah. So compare that to the dirty channel on the amp. And now listen what happens when we put the two of them together. So got a bit more drive going on there. So a little bit of drive added to a little bit of drive gives us more distortion, but because I'm not pushing any gain stage too far, it still keeps a bit of clarity. Twiddle around with this a little bit more, and I'll go to the other setting on the Angry Driver, which is the Angry Charlie, which is a more gainy sort of drive. So this is the pedal just on its own, so this is the Angry Charlie sound. And this is the Angry Charlie going into the dirty channel on the amp. So compare the dirty channel on the amp, the dirty channel on the amp with Blues Driver, and the dirty channel on the amp with the Angry Charlie. Or I could twiddle around with the settings on the pedal, put this into the what we call the rather splendidly named BJ mode, which is the Blues Driver into the JHS Angry Charlie. So just on its own, it sounds like this. The clean channel on the amp, and into the dirty channel on the amp. So there I've actually got 3 gain stages going on. I've got light overdrive from the Blues Driver, a bit more drive, something a bit more saturated from the Angry Charlie, and then the light overdrive, the light level of gain on the dirty channel of the amp itself. And just for the hell of it, I've got another pedal down here I could turn on. This is the full tone plimsoll. So this is the plimsoll just on its own into the clean channel on the amp. Dirty channel on the amp on its own, and then put the two of them together. So the difference there is you're kind of bringing in the voice of the overdrive pedal. You know, before it was a little bit less mid-range focused because of the characteristics of the Blues Driver and the Angry Charlie pedals. The full tone plimsoll's got a bit more in the mid-range, and that kind of comes through in the sound. So this is quite a nice way you can sort of like dial in a drive sound or a drive sound voice of your choosing by picking drive pedals to put in front of the amp. So you're kind of combining characteristics. And because you're only using a moderate or a small amount of gain in each pedal, it's never getting overwhelmed, and you've still got the definition of the guitar's natural voice coming through. So as you can hear, there are lots of different combinations and different sounds by bringing in the different pedals with their own voices. But all the gain stages there are set relatively low, so we're adding in little bits of gain and little bits of gain, rather than just one huge amount where you start to just get all mushy and undefined. As I've said before, if you want to get the most out of this, you should be listening on a good set of speakers or headphones or something. Just listen to this on a cell phone or something like that. You probably won't get the benefit because of the way the audio is just basically pretty rubbish on a phone. But there you go. There's some different combinations. Last thing I want to talk about though is use of splitting your signal and including a clean channel. Now this sounds really, really counterintuitive. The idea that if you want a good, strong, heavy sound, to actually have a clean signal there. Now, to understand this, we need to talk a little bit about what's happening with distortion. When you look at the signal coming from a guitar, like the sound wave, you've got quite a strong attack from when the pick hits the strings. It's what we call a transient. So you've got like a peak in the signal when the pick hits the strings, and the signal, as it goes into a drive pedal or a distortion stage or whatever, it's getting compressed. It's getting clipped. It's getting compressed, and you lose some of the attack off of the transients. and that's why you lose some definition, because you're not getting that spike in the sound as the pick hits the strings. If you play with a compressor pedal, you'll know the sort of effect that I'm talking about. But you get a kind of compression with a distortion effect. So what you can do is you can route your signal into two separate paths. Have one that stays clean and one that goes through the drive stages, and then you can mix the two together. So what I've got set up here is I've got a little box down on the floor here that's splitting the signal. So we've got, what have we got? This is the dirty channel on the amp with a bit of blues driver and a bit of plimsoll, so 3 gain stages. Quite dirty, quite overdriven, but hopefully you can still hear plenty definition in what I'm playing. But I've also got, in another channel, I've got this. Perfectly clean signal. Now all I'm going to do is just play through and kind of blend those two together, and you can hear the effect that having the clean signal in the mix as well gives you. Yeah, so you can hear the difference that having the bit of clean signal in there gives you. So because what you have, what's happening is you're not clipping, you're not compressing that clean signal, so you're still getting the attack and the transient signal as the pick's hitting the string, and that's helping you to get the definition, because you can hear those strings being struck much more clearly than you would if it was just playing through purely a saturated or overdriven signal path. Once you get into multipath guitar signals, it gets really, really interesting. You can do all sorts of things like clean and dirty and wet and dry mixes and all that sort of thing, which is way beyond the scope of this video. But basically just kind of open your eyes up and you open up your ears to the possibility of splitting your signal path somewhere on your pedal board and having a clean path and dirty path. If you can do 2 separate amps, that's great, because you can really split the sound out across the spectrum. But like I say, something to consider. So hopefully that's kind of dispelled the myth that more gain means a heavier sound. Adding in gain stages can give you a heavier sound, but just putting a whole load of gain into one place by turning the amp up full or whatever, you are possibly going to lose definition and your sound is going to suffer. Okay, I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please click like down there. If you really enjoyed it, you want to see other videos that I post on the channel, then please click subscribe. You're welcome to leave a comment, but I don't always see those, so if you've got a specific question that you want to ask me, whether it's about guitar gear, music theory, anything like that, anything to do with guitar and music, then if you go here, fill in that form, send your question in, I'll try and get around to answering it in a future video. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.